Yes, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, and greetings from beautiful Southwest Florida. I would much prefer to be joining you today in Korea so that we could meet and speak one-on-one with each other, but as we know, that's not possible. Um, this morning, I am going to talk about LNG and the pathway forward. And I'll be speaking about why we choose LNG, how LNG can lead to carbon neutrality, which, as we all know, is a very important subject today, and talk a little bit about the alternatives and how we see them and how we see them working into what we're talking about and doing. Before I do that, let me first uh, give you a brief overview of SEA-LNG. SEA-LNG is a 4-year-old organization, and it is committed to being a credible advocacy for maritime LNG. We work through a number of independent experts. We do a significant amount of research, and we also, all the research we do is also peer reviewed by academics around the world. And we believe that it's important that our members actually shape our message and our activities. We are very proud of the fact that our members include all elements of the value chain from the molecules all the way to the end users. All of our members are also very innovative and have been first movers in many activities relating to LNG. We're also pleased that we deal with a lot of other like-minded associations around the world, in Europe, in North America, in Asia, and are proud of the fact that we have a working relationship with your own Korean LNG Bunkering Industry Association. Our vision is very clear. We want to work towards the environmental issues, the commercial issues, and the operational issues, all of which provide challenges as we move forward with new fuels in the maritime industry in the 21st century. If you look on our website, which I welcome and encourage you to do, you will see that we deal with a lot of issues like emissions, like safety, consumer pressures, commercial activities, bunkering, the global fleet, and we back all this up with a lot of information and a lot of other case studies and other activities. These include investment cases that we do for and with ship owners, where we talk about specific type vessels, container ships, trans-Pacific, ro-ro ships, bulk carriers, and we look at this on a 10-year horizon when it comes to investments in LNG and the value of LNG as owners look at investments. We've also done a significant amount of work on emissions. Our Sphera ThinkStep LNG GHG life cycle and assessment has been a standard in the industry for the last year and a half. And I think everyone understands the GHG benefits of LNG on a well-to-wake basis. These sorts of assessments are very important because it's important that we look at all fuels and all alternatives on a fair and equal basis. And that's what we try to do in our alternative fuel studies. And at recognizing the importance of bio and synthetics, last year we commissioned Delft University to do a detailed study on the future opportunities of bio and synthetic. I'll talk about those a little bit going forward, but again, they're all on our website and very much available. They're very detailed, but they all have executive summaries that I think we can all understand. We also work very hard with our port partners on infrastructure cases, And we have a very useful tool, I think, called Bunker Navigator, which shows you where LNG is available around the world and what ports, what locations. And I'll show you a bit of a map of that in a minute. And then we do work with regulators, policymakers, as I said, others like-minded associations around the world. And at the end of the day, we believe that LNG as a marine fuel will be best served if we all collaborate, if we communicate openly and honestly on what we're doing, and then we demonstrate. We demonstrate and we actually show what we're doing and make sure that the world understands. By working together and communicating and demonstrating what we do, we can make a difference. We can make a difference now, because waiting for alternatives, waiting for magic solutions is frankly not an option, and we'll talk about that a little more as well. So why LNG? Well, it's very clear that LNG is a winner in the air quality issues. This year, with the pandemic, issues relating to global health are very much on all of our minds. And we all know that virtually all of our cities still have some level of air quality issues, some more than others, but certainly no one is really free from air quality concerns. And LNG is a major tool to solving those issues by eliminating SOx, dramatically reducing NOx, and essentially eliminating particulate matters, all of which are very, very important for human health. Because of the emphasis on decarbonization over the last couple of years, many of the air quality issues associated with LNG have sort of been swept to the side. But we need to remember that they are still very, very important. As noted, LNG provides a pathway forward, together with EEDI changes to the IMO targets for 2030, and then using bio and synthetic methane products gives us a pathway to 2050, and we'll talk about that later. Very, very importantly in our industry, safety. As ship owners, as ship operators, as people associated with the industry, we understand the concerns for safety and the safety of our crews and the tens of thousands of seamen around the world, many of which are probably in this room or listening to this conference today. The other important aspect is LNG is available now. It's available in great quantities. It's competitive, and we are now getting very close to solving many of the so-called last mile problems as infrastructure and LNG bunkering has been increasing significantly over the last year or two. LNG is really the only fuel currently available, and available probably for the next decade or more, that can provide the kind of competitive and emissions reductions that we need in this industry. LNG bunkering has always been a major concern for many. This is a map out of our Bunker Navigator tool. As you can see, the green dots are where LNG is currently available. The blues are where it's being planned, and probably within the next year or two or less will be available. I would also note that this changes almost daily. Today, for example, LNG bunkering was opened up for the Great Lakes of the United States and Canada. The first bunkering ever in the Great Lakes took place today. It'll be publicized tomorrow morning, but it involved an LNG-capable ship in the port of Hamilton, Ontario, taking about 10 truckloads of LNG in a truck-to-ship transfer. Very important, because now LNG is available in the lakes just as it's available, as you can see, in many other parts of the world. In order to deliver this LNG, We also need bunker vessels. And again, we see a very significant growth of bunker vessels throughout the world. And I believe that we will see numbers even beyond this as we get into 22 and 2023, as the world continues to embrace LNG as an important fuel. Same for the global fleet growth. We see it approaching 500 vessels by 2022. I believe that with what we see in the current order books, as the orders start to come in again after the pandemic, as the maritime industry coming back to its full vibrant activities, I think we will see more and more emphasis on LNG as a viable alternative fuel going forward. So I think we will see numbers well beyond this as the fleet continues to grow, and therefore the bunker fleet will also grow, as I mentioned before. The value of LNG is pretty clear. It's very competitive, and importantly, it's fairly stable in price. If we look at the price of conventional fuels over the last 10 or 20 years, we constantly see an up and down, and up and down, and up and down. LNG is relatively stable. As ship owners, we know that that's important. LNG also has good energy density, about 20% more than conventional fuels. And when you look at some of the possible alternatives, like renewable ammonia, it has twice the energy density of that alternative. That means that if you're going to use that other type of fuel, you're going to need twice as much storage capacity to go the same distance. More storage capacity, less cargo capacity. Less cargo capacity, the less viable the ship is to the investor as an asset to carry cargo. At the end of the day, we want ships to carry cargo, not their fuel. LNG is also, the technology is there, the dual fuel technology is there. It's getting better every day. A lot of changes are taking place as we speak, as the original equipment manufacturers refine the processes and refine the work that they're doing with these dual fuel engines. And we also know that dual fuel means that they can also burn bio and synthetic methane products, as well as potentially even renewable ammonia, when and if it ever becomes available and safe. And while we look at all these positive attributes, we also need to understand that methane slip is a concern. But it's important to note that the OEMs, the WinGDs of this world, the MANs, the Wärtsiläs, have all been working tirelessly for a long time, because they understand that methane slip is an unacceptable issue. And even in the last few years, the technology that they've developed has decreased slip by about 50% in many of the low pressure engines. We also know that in the high pressure engines, it's not really an issue. So when we look at the competitive case, and you'll see this in more detail in our website when you look at investment cases, but basically this is a compilation of certain investment cases that we've done specifically for 14,000 TEU new builds. We know that the cost of LNG is stable. We know that that it's competitive with other energy costs. And the CapEx hurdle, as shipyards around the world, especially in Korea, get more comfortable with the technology, we know that the CapEx is coming down. And in all of the studies we've done, we find that over a 10-year horizon, the ROI on a net present value basis using LNG is very, very high as compared to open loop scrubbers. And it also has a payback period against the conventional or or ultra low sulfur fuel engines of under 2 years. Those are important attributes for investment cases. It's important attributes for ship owners. As we continue to look ahead, we certainly understand that there are major issues with carbon neutrality and the move to decarbonize not only the maritime industry, but all other industries. A big part of that is methane slip, as I mentioned. And what you see in this chart is the reduction in GHG total emissions from 98 to about 2018. And you see a steady decline because of work that the OEMs have done with combustions, with fuel technology, and now with automated combustion controls. And we will continue to see that work being done because we understand that it's important, and we understand that it's important that slip needs to be contained. We also understand that the environmental forces at work around our world are very strong and very important. And GHG emissions is a major concern, just as air quality is and should be a major concern. We also know that investors and companies themselves are getting very active in their environmental, social, and governance matters. This is what leads to things like the Poseidon Principles and the Sea Charter Cargo initiatives, where bankers are now looking at the long-term environmental viability of assets. This is an important consideration because unless you can meet the environmental goals 2030, 2050, and beyond, the investment may not be viable. Another important set of influences, of course, are the ports and their ability to provide LNG, their ability to facilitate bunkering, their ability to move forward. And again, your own Korean LNG Bunkering Industry Association, I know, works diligently in those areas. When we look at the actual numbers and how do we come up with the 21% carbon reductions on a well-to-wake basis? Well, the Think Step Now Sphere study that we did over a year ago, we looked at HFO, we looked at MGO 0.1, which is the current fuel, and then we looked at the emissions cases from both the supply side and the combustion side for two-stroke diesel as well as two-stroke Otto cycles. And again, the numbers are clear. The numbers have not been disputed. They were peer-reviewed, and those numbers are good. At the same time, we also know that we can take that reduction number up to about 34% by adding bio-LNG. That is, you mix a bioproduct as a drop-in fuel with your existing LNG. And of course, as I've mentioned many times, the reductions of SOx, NOx, and particulate matter don't have to be stated here, but are obvious and well known and very important. Now, how do we get ultimately to net zero? How do we increase the ability? Because we know that LNG is a fossil fuel. Well, by introducing bio-LNG, by introducing bioproducts, by introducing ultimately synthetic LNG, we can dramatically reduce the GHG emissions, and eventually, over a long period of time, perhaps 2 or 3 decades, bio-LNG becomes more scalable and globally available. I can tell you from my own experience and work experience that certainly here in the United States and in Europe and in other parts of the world, we're seeing a lot of emphasis and a lot of interest in developing bioproducts. Why? Because it also solves another major global problem, and that is waste, garbage. The the byproducts from our animals, the byproducts from other things that are happening around the world. So if we can start to use those products and make them available for clean, net zero kinds of activities, then I think we're not only solving part of the maritime problem and emissions issues, but we're also solving other issues that we know are important around the world. This is a pathway that's available. It's actually being used now. For those of you that saw the announcement on the recent bunkering of the new CMA CGM Jacques Sade vessel, they actually introduced bio-LNG into their LNG fueling mix, and therefore got a much higher level of GHG reduction. And that's something that's important. And it's important to see companies like that lead the way in these kinds of activities. There's also a supplier in Europe that I'm pleased to say is a member of SEA-LNG called Gasum that provides a product to ships that includes varying levels of bioproducts in order to, again, reduce the GHG footprint, while, of course, also enhancing the air quality issues. So this is not just a pathway that people are thinking about. This is not just some idea and some new product. This is something that is available today, and it is being scaled up as we speak. Very important, because any other alternative is frankly just not available. So what about those alternatives? Well, last year we asked DNVGL, who are experts in this field, to do a study for us on all our alternative fuels. That study runs, as you can imagine, many, many pages. But what we did is we had them put it into a color-coded chart. Obviously, the dark green is great. Light green is not bad at all, pretty good. And then we go all the way to red, which is bad. And orange is, not so bad, but not great. And the yellow is in the middle. So we had them look at varying types of fuel, all the way from HFO with scrubbers and then low sulfur, the ultra low sulfur blends, all the way through LPG, ammonia, hydrogen, obviously LNG, and then full electric power. And if we block out the HFO and the low sulfur fuels and look at really what are the viable alternatives going forward, we see the attributes of LNG, we see the attributes of bio products, and then the attributes of ammonia and hydrogen. And these, you'll notice we did not make LNG all green or yellow. We actually know that as a fossil fuel, it has some emissions issues. However, when you then transition over to the biodiesel, the bio LNG product, you see that it's not quite as good, it's not perfect, but it is certainly moving in the right direction. And there are no reds. The capital costs, the availability, the flammability of some of these products, the toxicity of ammonia in an engine room is of grave concern. And the fact that hydrogen would be a super cryogenic, about 100 degrees Celsius colder than liquefied LNG or liquefied ammonia, is a matter of real concern. So These are studies and things that we've done that we think are important. And it's also important to note that today and in the foreseeable future, virtually all of the ammonia and hydrogen produced is from fossil fuel sources. Now, as more and more renewables are developed, obviously those will be the sources, but those would be the same sources for synthetic LNG as a follow-along product. And again, the potential for bio and synthetic to deliver zero GHG emissions is very, very strong and is something that is moving forward all around the world. What is the ultimate solution? What is ultimately going to happen? I don't think any of us have the crystal ball that is going to tell us that. But what we do know is that LNG is available now, that with the introduction of bio and synthetic products, it is sustainable for decades to come. And therefore, the assets and the monies we spend today are viable and workable for decades to come. That's important, that there are no stranded assets. So let me finish by showing you this chart, which we like to use as a graphic. And let's remember that LNG engine technology has millions of operating hours, is safe, is proven, that LNG as a marine fuel is mature, it's commercially viable, readily available, scalable, and bunkering is now available at almost all the major ports around the world, if not today, certainly within the next year or two. LNG as an air quality issue is fully compliant. Very importantly, as I think we all know, as a cryogenic and as a liquefied gas, if it does manage to escape as a liquid, it cannot pollute because it will immediately gasify. So as opposed to heavy fuels, which create marine pollution and accidental spills, that cannot happen with LNG. And as we know, the reductions in pollutants, whether they be SOx, NOx, GHG, are there. And we can eventually get to zero emissions through the introduction of bio and synthetic. So I like the picture of the Jacques Sadé. I think CMS CGM is to be congratulated for their initiatives in the future. And LNG continues to be the only viable option that's available today, that's safe, available, improves air quality while reducing cargo. The pathway with bio and synthetic products is clear. Alternatives, while they may be viable in the long term, are literally decades away. And we don't know what it's going to take to produce them, to ultimately make all the technology work. And we don't understand whether or not there may or may not be unintended consequences associated with their development. And at the end of the day, waiting is not an option. Every day, every week, every month, every year that we wait for some of these magic solutions that may or may not come, the problem only gets worse. And that, in our view, is unacceptable. And LNG is really the only pathway forward to the cleaner environmental future that we see. With that, I thank you for your attention. I'm more than happy to answer any queries that you may have. If we don't have time today, I'm happy to answer them off of our website. I encourage you to visit the SEA-LNG website because I think you'll find it very interesting, and I think you'll find some good, important data there that is constantly refreshed. And I look forward to visiting with many of you next time I'm in Korea. Thank you very much for your attention.